my new opening to my welcome because I'm never sure when we go live. So I'm trying to figure out something to do other than, are we on? Are we on? Okay, everybody. Welcome to this segment of the Leadership Summit called Seeking the Path. I'm really excited every time I introduce you to a guest. But this one maybe peaks it all because so we've taken leadership and looked at it from a variety of angles and up, the mountain, many paths to success and leadership. But today's guest is what I would call a maverick super brain. And I'm going to explain that in a second. But first, let me remind you that my name is Lynette Louise. I am the brain broad. I have a great big brain that I take with me abroad, so it makes sense. And I have a new book called The 7 Senses of Leadership. The Brain Broad's Guide to Leadership Sensibilities. So there, my commercial is over. It's on Amazon.com, and you really should get it. It's got a lot of myth busting and brain information on how you access information from others and get your information across as well. So I think it's important. I also tell little leader stories to keep you interested when the brain science kind of starts making you droop. So good work, and I'm proud of it. So go and run to your Amazon and get that. All right, so enough with the commercial. This Leadership Summit has brought you people from comedy, from music, from get Tony Award winners, Emmy Award winners, and people that deserve great accolades in all kinds of business realms. Jay Gunkelman is today's guest, and one of the reasons that I wanted to bring him up is the niche concept, the concept that, you pick a niche and grow rich. And in Jay's case, you can see the sameness of his world, but he is so versatile. He is such a maverick. He has so many skills that I almost can't bring them to you. So before I read a little piece of his bio, I want to tell you a story that'll really help you to know the degree to which he serves others and gives back. So here I am, I decide, wow, I know so much about the brain. I'm doing such good work. People are getting better all over the place, all over the world. I better get a PhD because no one will listen to me otherwise. So I'm late in the game for getting letters after my name. And I go to school. And of course, we're all broke because we're going to school. And I meet this man. And he says, oh, you're a student? And he pulls out $100 and gives it to me. Now, two things. Without that $100, I couldn't have got out of the parking lot that day. So he was right, and it was timely, and an angel. Two, he does this all the time. So here's somebody who has attained a level of success in his life that he can actively give back in a hands-on way constantly. He's made changes in law. He's just so many things that when I wanted to interview him, my question really was, what are we going to talk about? Because we could take it from every angle. And I think I'm going to go with, you want something done, you give it to a busy person, because I've never sent Jay a request for help without getting an immediate answer. Jay Gunkelman, thank you for being here. I'm going to read a little piece of your bio off of your site because I want, oh no, it disappeared. I wanted to be sure that I got it right. Now it's up to you. You're going to have to do it. So Jay Gunkelman, hello. And I want to make sure we mention your book because even though most of my clients or the people that'll be watching this probably aren't into brain science and QEEG, some will be. So please, let's begin by giving your backstory, a little bit of who you are and who you are today.
Well, thanks for the invitation, Lynette. I've been around a long time. I'm old, so I have lots of little stories. I guess in the EEG realm, since you're the brain broad, I guess I should start out with my area in somewhat similar professional area. I started in the area of biofeedback and neurofeedback before the term neurofeedback existed. I had the first neurofeedback lab in the US. I wrote a grant when I was just a kid back in North Dakota and had the first state hospital-based biofeedback lab constructed for me. We pretty much had to build most of our own equipment because in 1972, if you think about what was, well, if you were around in 1972, you might think
I was
about what was
pregnant in 1972. That's what I was thinking.
well, I basically the equipment that you could purchase then was really kind of rudimentary, and um, this was a major lab, so we pretty much had to construct our own equipment. And having started from the clinical research end of things with developing treatments at a state hospital when there were no procedure manuals, there was nobody with any procedures out there. You had to invent your own. This was really very early. The early days of the Biofeedback Research Society, before it was the Biofeedback Society of America, before it was then AAPB. So this goes way, way, way back.
Can I interrupt you? Because what comes to my mind right now is I was in the early 80s, I got a degree in mainframe computers, and we were using key punch cards. And I can't imagine, but you must have had to use mainframes in the 70s.
Yes, yes. Our mainframe was 100 miles away from the state hospital, and they ran cable from the hospital to the computer and back because there was no way to hook up to the computer in 1972. It was at the university, basically, the university's mainframe, the mainframe in Fargo, don't you know?
Oh
So
my God. Okay. One more question, because I know they want leadership, but it's killing me. So did you how? Because key punching and flow charting, it isn't in real time, and biofeedback requires some semblance of real time.
well, our analysis was on the mainframe. The feedback was on analog devices that were there at the site. But if you're going to do analysis, you have to have a computer to pull in all the data and analyze it. So we had real-time access to the mainframe. Our computer time was well over $1 million a year back then in 1972 dollars. Um, we had the ability to call the university and tell them we need access to the mainframe. We had a half-hour notice basically, and they had to vacate the mainframe. If they were running grades at the university, whatever they were doing, they had to vacate it. We had access to the mainframe with the governor's dispensation, so we could kick the university off their own computer, use it real time for half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever we needed, and then shut us down and let the university go back to work. So it was an odd circumstance, and we were trying to allow the kind of analysis we were doing on the mainframe to be put into microcomputers back in 1976 when I moved to California. And I had a small company. Spectral Data Systems was a company back then. Jim Hart was on our board. Larry Woodard was the engineer, and myself. And we actually manufactured a two-channel EMG device for flexor extensor pair rehabilitation for muscle rehab, not just relaxation. And we had a temperature feedback machine, which was still popular then, for 1/10,000th of a degree change per second.
Wow.
It's still, I haven't seen anything like it yet since. But it was, and then we made a pocket-sized brainwave analyzer, which is when I decided I had to get out of the manufacturing business. I spent
Wow.
I spent about $150,000 of 1976 dollars on a mold to make the cases. Now, this doesn't get you cases; it gets you the mold. So,
Okay. But
and you have to remember when we displayed this device, a pocket-sized device, you could listen to your brain. It was a major organ chord, like a pipe organ. Low, middle, and high note were three bands you could feed back. So you could walk down the street listening to your brain activity. But we sold none of them, none, not a single one. In 1976, there was no more government funding for neurofeedback because in the early 70s, Paschwitz and Orn's research, which was a total failure, was used by the government to show that neurofeedback couldn't possibly work, so they wouldn't fund it. So with no funding, there was no purchasers. And at that point you think, well, I just lost I mean, the equivalent of $500,000 now, roughly. And you
You
think,
were how
well,
old? You were how old?
what's that?
You were how old at this time?
Oh, goodness, 1976. I was born in 1949. You can do the math. I was still a kid.
No, I can't. I have that brain problem with math.
But when you realize that you're losing money faster than you can imagine making it from the same field, this is the old joke. How do you make a small fortune in neurofeedback? You start with a large one. Well, that's what I saw, and I thought, well, this is crazy. I mean, how? What kind of life is it going to be? Your downward trajectory of your funds is going to hit the bottom at some point here. So I decided I had to get a job. And I looked in the newspaper. I found the strangest little itty bitty ad, the smallest little want ad you can possibly get. And it was all abbreviations: SM, small; MED, medical; CO, company; NDS, needs; FLD, field; REP, rep. Small medical device company needs field rep. I thought, well, my God, there's a phone number, I'll call it. There aren't that many jobs in the paper for EEG, or if you think about it. When was the last time you saw a want ad for an EEG tech? So a small medical device company, I thought, well, at least it's medical, and I interviewed, and at the time, this is the early days of neurofeedback, biofeedback, and I had a ponytail I could sit on. And so I walked into my interview, and the guy says, your background's perfect. We need somebody to travel around the US and train people how to hook up EEGs and transmit the data off of satellite into a receiving center. And I thought, well, that sounds fun. And he said, well, the guy you're going to interview with tomorrow is real conservative. You're going to have to meet with doctors and hospital administrators, and he won't even speak to you if you have a ponytail. I mean, it's a waste of our time because, that you don't fit the mold for meeting with hospital administrators with a ponytail. And, 1976, this was hippie era, and, you can kind of pull off long hair nowadays in some respects, but this was not the era for that. And so, realizing I needed to get a job, I went to Berkeley. I had my ponytail cut off, which I had. Actually, they were so gracious. They washed my hair, braided it, cut the braid off with clasps at the top and bottom. I sent it home to my mother, who had been telling me to cut my hair for a decade. So
That's so awesome.
she framed it. It was on the wall at her house. Odd things in a picture frame. But the next day, I met with the president of the organization, and he said, "You're perfect for the job, except you're going to have to meet with hospital administrators, and you're going to need to cut your hair." And I had my hair blocked off. It was a nice cut, but it wasn't like way cut. It was like blocked at the back. This wasn't a beetle cut or anything. This was, it was a regular haircut, but it was a little blocked in the back. And I looked him straight in the eye and I told him, "Listen, yesterday I could sit on my ponytail. It's just hair. I'll shave it off if you want. What style do you want my hair to be?" And his jaw dropped and he looked at me, but they needed to hire somebody. So they actually hired me. And I did that for about 8 months. I traveled around the US 6 to 8 weeks at a time, and then back to California for a week or so. And then, I got tired of the travel. It was just on the road, road warrior, work. And I told them I was, getting tired of being on the road. And so they hired me to run the receiving lab in San Francisco, where we did, on a minimum day, 100 EEGs.
Oh my goodness. So there, you made your way right back where you
Yeah.
started.
And 100 EEGs in a day is pretty hard to find. I mean, this was a unique operation at the bottom of a funnel where 400 hospitals in the US, small hospitals, albeit, but 400 of them. And we always had the nightmare that one day all of them were going to need service, and we'd end up with a 400 plus day. And 100 is doable, quite easily doable if you're used to
you, maybe.
100, 150, 200, you can kind of get by, but after that, it's you're cross-eyed by noon, and you can't do that. So
For those of you who don't know what an EEG is, because not everybody's in the medical field, you're talking about the electroencephalograph, the brainwave data that you see in the movies. Okay, and yes, you're an enormous brain. We could listen to your story the entire day, but we need to cut to where you're at today. And one more thing. So it sounds like you've always been in the medical field, but I know that you've done other stuff because I've heard differences that you've made in the world politically, or laws that you've had changed. So it's almost like there's so much to you. I don't know what would benefit people the most, and we want to be of service here. And I think what would benefit them the most is kind of to know where you're at now, and then let's get to some tips for how a person can traverse all of the life lessons and land in a place of service and affluence at the same time.
Well, my background is that I was an unreasonably a wild kid studying whatever I wanted at school. I wasn't wild behaviorally, but I basically was in a gifted program basically, and they allowed me to study whatever I wanted, and I studied a lot of stuff. So not only did I enjoy medicine as a general area, but I also enjoyed science and physics and engineering. And all of that background sometimes comes in handy. They tell you a liberal education where you learn a little bit of everything does come in handy. Well, mine was a liberal education. I studied everything and lots of it. But if you hold the knowledge in your head and use it when it's handy, you run into times when things can be done. I was downwind of a refinery that dumped toxic waste on the town I was in for 16 days. And after your neighbor dumps stuff over the fence for 16 days and doesn't tell you about it, you decide that you need to figure out something to design to tell you that they're dumping stuff over the fence. So, historically, refineries built a little shed on the fence line, and they'd have a pump inside sucking air through a little hole on the side of the wall of the shed. And if pollution happened to hit that hole, it would be sucked into a gas analyzer and they would detect it. Well, the efficiency of that is only good if it hits that hole. What's the likelihood of the pollution from a giant refinery happening to find its way to one spot on a fence line where you're monitoring a little hole? So I thought, well, why don't we use lasers? And this is 25 years ago. So this is, early on in the laser field. And I happened to interact a little bit with DARPA, and I knew about some laser technology that was being used in the first Gulf War, weapons inspectors using it. And I decided that that was really the state of the art, and it was so much of a dark art at the time, nobody really knew about it. So uh, I designed a meter diameter laser, a big laser, shooting a kilometer long beam through a supercooled interferometer, which gives you a spectral fingerprint of any chemical that breaks the beam. Every chemical absorbs energy as the light goes through it, a laser light going through it. And the kind of energy that it's absorbed is directly related to the kind of chemistry in the beam. So if you have a clean air beam that you shot when there was no stink out there, and now you shoot a dirty air beam, you subtract the clean air beam, you know what spectral peaks are sticking up that shouldn't be there. And if you have a library of chemistry, you now know what stinky bad stuff is in the beam. So we thought, well, they didn't tell us for 16 days. What we need to do is shoot a laser along their fence line that will detect when stinky stuff is coming our way. And, at the time, there were uh, there were already Air Resources Board in California, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, all these people whose job it was to detect stinks, but their methods were, if they could catch it in a little canister, then they could analyze it. Well, we're analyzing it real time. If it doesn't have to hit your canister, it just has to break our kilometer-long beam. And if you set up one beam upwind and one beam downwind, you now know exactly what's being added to the environment. So I thought this was a pretty good system. And at the time, all the regulators told me I was crazy. And I said, well, that aside, how about this technology? I'm fine with being crazy, but this technology, I think, is what you really should be doing. And they basically dismissed it. They thought, well, this is physics. Why use physics to detect chemistry? Well, uh, they wanted something in a petri dish kind of chemistry, and I was doing spectral absorbance stuff, and they just didn't understand it at all. I mean, not at all. And 25 years later, about 24 years later, about a year and a half ago, the Air Quality Management District in the Bay Area brought together the EPA, California Air Resources Board, all the various universities, the US EPA, and me to advise them on air quality monitoring technologies. And the system I designed 25 years ago is now mandated. They have until the end of this year to submit their proposed design for all the refineries in the Bay Area to build this system. I've had one of them with a system online real-time running for 25 years. So we know how to do this stuff.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, okay, go ahead and finish your point.
And we've been studied. Drexel University did a whole big project on what they call citizen engineers, where people that have no business doing something just do it because they need it done. I grew up in Fargo. If you want something done, you do it. There's nobody else to do it. I mean, you can't hire anybody because there isn't anybody. I mean, it's Fargo. The whole state has 630,000 people in the state. You can't. If you want it done, you got to just roll up your sleeves and figure out how to do it. So, I've been called all sorts of things, bullheaded, you name it. But when I want something done, I just roll up my sleeves and do it. Invent it, make it, build it, whatever it happens to be.
Okay, now I'm going to cut you off for a second. First of all, yes, in Canada it was the same. You had to do everything, so you become kind of multifaceted. What I'm hearing is you're ahead of the curve. Because this is leadership, right? So you're ahead of the curve, but you somewhere you have the confidence to stay with it, to go at it, to keep doing it. You have the action orientation to make it happen. You have longevity, because 25 years is a long time to make something happen and to stay at it. We could look at all these pieces. What I really like and haven't heard from anyone else is the statement about curiosity of so many fields and how having all that in your head has come in handy. Can you talk about that a teensy bit, remembering that people are trying to get leadership advice?
Sure. If you're going to learn something, if you're interested in it, it's easy. The only things in school that were tough are things you had to do because they made you do it. But if you're intrinsically interested in something, man, that was a piece of cake. You could snap up info on something you're interested in a flash. And I tried to follow my interests in school. I mean, it's nice to have the luxury of being turned loose in school. And I kind of turned myself loose in school. They expect you to have an advisor, and they expect you to stand in line for then punch cards to get in each class, and then your advisor signs your punch card for the advisor, and then they group those all together and they send them to the computer center. Well, I never went through registration at the university. I hate standing in line. It's a pet peeve of mine. And so I go to this field house and I see nothing but lines of people, which doesn't sound like a good time to me. And I just watch the flow. Get a card, get a card, get a card for your classes, get the advisor to sign it. They bundle them, send them to the computer center. Well, there's not much of a line at the computer center. There is no line at the computer center. It's just people working the computers. So you go to the computer center. Don't have to stand in line. Strike up a conversation with a few people, get to know somebody, and then they'll let you enroll in whatever you want to enroll in. And they were a little leery of me with the lack of an advisor card. And I asked them, okay, when you're done with the cards, where do they go? Well, we bunch them up and box them up and we send them to a warehouse. Do they ever come back? Do you ever look at them? No. Oh, okay. Well, sign your advisor card. You're self-advised, you know. So I basically just literally took whatever I wanted and did not have an advisor,
But
which
you
meant,
you got the backstory. You found out what's the backstory to this and what's the
yeah,
loophole. It's my
yeah,
favorite one. What's the backstory? What's the loophole? Get
yeah.
through them.
If you show me the rules, I'll find a way around them. You know, I mean, that's I'm self-directed. I don't take quote advice very well. I'm self-directed, and
But you do take counsel, right?
yeah, I listen I'll listen to advice, but I don't take it. It's it's important for me to basically do things that I'm intrinsically motivated to do. Life is a lot more fun that way, and as long as I'm enjoying things, I'm doing it right. It's kind of a basic rule. If it's not fun, you're doing it wrong. You know, so I found a way to kind of enjoy what I was doing.
Okay. All right. So we have to. You're so interesting, Jay. I swear, I should have you on my show we should co-host. Okay. Except you're so busy. You're hard to get. I asked 3 questions of every person, so I'm going to ask you those
Okay.
3 questions, and then we'll go ahead and tell people how to, go check you out on the web and get your book and all that.
Okay.
Okay. So, question number 1: what is your definition of leadership?
Well, there's leadership, and then there's good leadership. Leadership in general, as a general rule, I'm not that pleased with a lot of people's leadership. However, if you get good leadership, you've actually got somebody who doesn't feel like you've got the bit in your mouth. A good leader serves. A good leader doesn't direct. You do this, you do that. Well, that's a boss. That's not a leader. And the people that I've known that were real leaders uh, didn't necessarily always sit at the top of the hierarchy either. If you go into a company, you've got a pyramid of CEO, vice presidencies, directors of things as they go down, and quite often the real leadership isn't from the top down. It's somewhere in the middle of the person that has the go-to person that they look to actually get it done, to do it, to direct it. The boss is at the top, but the boss isn't always a leader. And I would look more to true leadership than I would to hierarchy.
Okay, fantastic. All right, and what's your definition of success?
Happiness. Uh, if what you're doing is truly successful, it will make you happy. Money doesn't make me happy. Lots of things that people typically consider as measures of success mean nothing to me. But if it tickles my fancy, and I'm happy, that's success for me. Unless it makes me happy, I consider it a relative failure.
I love that. I actually always say that I think we should rewrite the Constitution to say, instead of pursuit of happiness, the attainment of happiness, because calling it the pursuit of happiness leaves us in that always chasing the horizon and never be allowing ourselves to be happy now. And I think the real trick is to be happy now. I love that you said that.
Our Constitution allows us the pursuit. It doesn't guarantee us the delivery.
Right, exactly. Okay, so here's the 3rd question. If you were giving advice, okay, you're giving advice to me. Yeah, to me. You're giving advice to me. How would you describe what I should change, or what would be the path that I would want to traverse to get to success, given that I am trying to get my PhD and find it really challenging to do a dissertation?
Well, I would suggest that your dissertation be something that you're intrinsically interested in. And also, pretty much anybody I've ever seen go for a PhD goes in trying to solve the world's problems with their PhD, a big, gigantic PhD that's overarching and solves all the questions. Don't do that. You'll never graduate. You need to take a bite-sized piece of something that tastes good to you, and digest that alone. Don't try for the big pieces. Pick a small piece that's doable so that you can actually get out the other end of school, because school is just the start. You get your PhD, that's like the minimum basic standard for going forward. It's not really the end goal. And
isn't that cool, Jay? Every other person, I've left it very vague, but I went ahead and made it, since we have that relationship through school and all that stuff, made it personal to get a little personal advice, but also also because your answer was cleaner. I've left it so general in the past that people are a little lost, like, how do I give advice? But if you're listening to what you said, I think that applies to everything.
yeah, you can't do everything. You have to take bite-sized pieces, and they should be pieces that you want to eat in the first place. Don't take a bite of something that's bitter and nasty. Get a chomp down on something that's that's savory if you like savory, or sweet if you like sweet. But find what you love and follow that. And it's very hard to be misguided if you are driven driven by your intrinsic motivations. And you know, you might be intrinsically motivated to do a few silly things in life, but most of your real things you would like to do end up being well motivated. Um, of some of the things I've tried to do because they seemed fun or like the right thing, I'm sure that there are a handful of them over the years that I could have shed and not have suffered a bit. But most of the gems that I've spotted and grabbed because I thought they were sparkly were things that I really benefited from. And follow your internal instincts and pretty much get rid of the outside directions of you should do this or you should do that. I mean, if I catch myself shoulding on myself, I quit as fast as I can. It's not a good outcome if I'm motivated by the shoulds. And if it's the I feel like it and that's why I'm doing it, those are projects that I finish. Those are projects that I can do. And I do stick to things. I'm not easily dissuaded, and I'm fine taking on something that's going to take a decade. Even though, as you probably know, my health is like iffy at best. But I'm fine taking on a project if it's a decade-long project. If it's got to be done, it's got to be done. And if it takes a decade to do it right, that's the way to do it.
That's brilliant. And I just want to say that that's very true of you, Jay, that absolutely walk your talk.
The South Koreans are collecting a brand new EEG database from scratch. 5 years ago, they consulted with me, and I have never charged them a penny for consults. I've worked with them for 5 years now. And I told them at the first that if you do this like everybody else has done it, you're going to have something that's just like everybody else's, and we don't need that. If this is just another one of the handful that are out there, this is not a project I want to be involved in. But if you want to do this right, you're going to keep males and females separate, because last I knew they were different.
Yes, we're different.
And now that they've collected data for 4 years, they have 800 healthy, normal subjects that have been perfectly well screened. And they're separating male and female. During the developmental trajectory, males and females are out of phase. They're exactly out of phase. If you combine two waveforms, they're out of phase. What do you get?
Phase cancellation.
You get a curve that you don't want to be compared to. What do we have, a
Right.
Unix? We have a Unix database, so our as our field moves forward, we have to think differently than we have historically. And we can't just think in terms of simple univariate statistics. We need to think in a much more complex fashion. And it's wonderful to see well-dedicated hard science folks, MD, PhDs, doing the work and doing it right. And they have 4 more years to collect before they're done.
Wow. Yeah,
And
people
nobody,
underestimate the level of commitment that you have to make a difference in the world.
yeah, everybody makes a difference in some fashion. If you want to really grab the foundations of the world and shake it a bit, that's a heavy job, but it's doable. And my environmental consulting work has been my avocation. I've never charged for it, but I was sued for $42 million once for stopping a project, conspiracy to obstruct a project.
Okay, I gotta tell you guys that we could talk to Jay for 100 years. We're way past time, but he's got so much. I want to leave it on you. We're sued for $42 million. I want them to go, oh my gosh, and maybe we'll get them.
That was a slap suit. They tried to shut us up, and when you get a slap suit filed against you, the only thing you can do is slap back. And we sued them for suing us, and their suit was thrown out of court. They were chastised for filing their suit. The judge in open court said that he would have the lawyer's license if he ever did anything like that again in open court. And we won $250,000 suing the 5 people that filed the suit against us. And theirs was thrown out. But it's bad karma money, so that all that money went to the Sierra Club Legal Defense Fund. I had a good lawyer, and he's a good friend, and I don't have difficulty getting a lawyer because he's a good friend. But somebody somewhere sometime was going to need money to defend themselves for the similar kind of thing. So all that money went to Sierra Club Legal Defense Fund. It's bad karma money. You don't want to touch that money, Okay.
So. But you say that so simple and easy, and so many of the people that I'm interviewing are trying to say it's about give back. Why I think you're such a fantastic guest is it just rolls off your tongue because you really do all this stuff. You have a very clear and ethical understanding of what should be coming towards you when you're giving back. You really are one of my heroes, Jay, and I really appreciate you being on here.
Well, there's a difference between vocation and avocation. My avocation I've never charged for, so I just do that for fun.
We have to close the show, so you need to tell them how to connect with you if you want to be, or tell them about your company website and the name of your book.
Sure. I do quantitative EEGs, QEEGs. So I am QEEGJAY. And that's my email name, but it's at sbcglobal.net, which is an old address, but I haven't changed it since. And the book may be written by me, but I gave it away immediately as a fundraiser for the foundation. The foundation is FNNR, the Foundation for Neurofeedback and Neuroscience Research. And it's a fundraiser for them, so I can talk about the book without feeling bad that I'm trying to sell something of mine, because it's not mine, it's theirs. We gave it to them. It's the book on the art of artifacting, and it's a way to look at EEG to clean it up before you analyze it. The review of the book was originally written by John Hughes, MD, PhD, an epileptologist, and his review basically said that the only difficult thing with the book is, the only problem with it is to get everybody to read it. So anyway, it's available through the FNNR Foundation, or on Amazon. I guess the money still goes to the foundation, but they market it on Amazon as well. And it's called The Art of Artifacting. I did that with Corey Hammond as co-author.
All right. Thank you so much, Jay Gunkelman. You are always a good story, a font of information, and a great inspiration. I really, truly appreciate you doing the show.
My pleasure. Great to see you again.
You too. Bye.